Hello and welcome to the 2019 Key Action 3 Startup video. The aim of this video is to provide you with the information you need to manage your project effectively. We will be covering information about your grant agreement, special and general conditions and annexes, and we will also be covering impact and dissemination. Under this key action, there are two types of activities that you could have applied for. These being national meetings, which are normally held in the UK, and transnational project meetings that can be held outside of the UK and within the countries of the participating organisations. These meetings would normally be a seminar, national meetings, consultations of young people, and events that promote debates. On screen now, you can see the budget categories associated with Key Action 3. For your type of project, there are two types of costs in your budget, and these are called unit costs and real costs. Unit costs are awarded based on fixed rates. If you remember in your application form, the travel was claimed according to distance band and set rates. This means that if the activity takes place and the person travels, your project will be entitled to the fixed full rate. Real costs work slightly different. They're based on the principle of real costs, and we only fund your actual expenditure. If you've been awarded special needs or exceptional costs, please remember that we will pay according to receipted expenditure. Therefore, you will be required to keep receipts and invoices. So next we're going to look at the grant agreement and the contractual rules. The first thing to mention is that you should have all received your grant agreement via email. Your grant agreement is split into two parts, the special conditions and the general conditions that can be found on our website. You should have received the following documents along with your grant agreement. You would have received Annex 1, which is the general conditions. Annex 2 is the estimated budget. This is important as it contains specific information regarding your budget and provides you with a clear breakdown as to the amount of funding you've been awarded for each budget category. You will have also received Annex 3. This is the financial and contractual rules of your project, and this contains clarification on the use of the grant under the different budget categories, and most importantly, here is where you'll find details on supporting documentation you will need for the different budget categories. Annex 4 details the unit cost your project should work by and any applicable rates. Annex 7 is your bank details form, and this should be returned along with 2 copies of your grant agreement. And also Annex 8, which is GDPR. Part 2, General Conditions of your grant agreement, can be found on our website under the General Conditions section. Please consult Part 2, General Conditions, Mono Beneficiary. We will begin by looking at the special conditions of your grant agreement. Your grant agreement is a legal document between the UK National Agency and your organisation. It is a contract and becomes valid once it is countersigned. Article 1.2 of the grant agreement details your project start and end dates. You will need to ensure that all activities take place within these dates. If during the duration of your project you require an extension, you will need to let us know with a minimum of 30 days before the end date of your project. Any activities that take place out of your project start and end dates will be deemed ineligible and will not be funded. So Article 1.3 details the maximum amount of grant for your project. This amount cannot be increased retrospectively. It is important to be aware that you are not automatically entitled to the full grant amount. You have been awarded your grant based on activities being carried out as applied for in your application form. If you do experience any changes within the project, please ensure that you do let us know as soon as possible. Article 1.3.3 contains information about budget transfers. Budget transfers allow you to move funding from one budget category to another. When transferring funds, there are rules which must be respected, and if you have any doubts, please email us the proposed plan. On screen now is a diagram explaining the budget transfer rules. You are able to transfer up to 100% of the funds allocated for organisational support to travel and vice versa. You are also able to transfer up to 10% between special needs and exceptional costs. These rules are outlined in Article 1.3.3 of your grant agreement. The UK National Agency will always make payments in euros. You will receive your payment within 30 days of the UK National Agency countersigning your grant agreement. Your final report is seen as a request for payment of the balance of your grant, and it must be submitted within 60 calendar days after the end date of your project. Your final payment will be processed once your final report has been submitted and assessed. Please note that all reporting takes place on Mobility Tool Plus. You will receive final payment of your report within 60 calendar days upon receipt of us having your final report. If the report or project does not meet assessed standards outlined at application stage, the final payment could be reduced or withdrawn. In light of the recent GDPR changes, we now have a new clause in the grant agreement that states the division of roles, which you can see on screen now. Article 1.6.3 details the communication details of the National Agency. Here you can see our address and also the email address. If you have any project-specific queries, then please do direct them to the email address shown on screen. All reporting takes place on Mobility Tool Plus, and you will need to ensure that it is updated on a regular basis and that you record everything that has taken place within the project. As a recipient of European Union funding, you are required to acknowledge the contribution of EU programme funding. The logo on the screen now should be used on any material produced for your project. You can also find this on our website. Next, we're going to look at part 2 of the grant agreement, which is the general conditions, which you can find on our website. Any changes or amendments to your project and grant agreement must be made in writing to the UK National Agency for our consideration. We would suggest doing this well in advance and within a minimum of 30 days. If you are aware of any changes throughout the project, you must let us know. Please ensure that these requests are justified and sent to us in advance of when the change is likely to happen. We will then consider any project changes on a case-by-case basis and will be in contact with you. There are numerous changes your organisation may wish to make to your project. You can see a list of them on screen now. Article 2.19.1 contains information about eligible costs for unit costs and actual costs. The full criteria for eligible costs is outlined here. All costs incurred and activities must take place within the project start and end dates as per your grant agreement. Any activity that falls outside of your overall project dates will be deemed ineligible and you won't be able to claim the costs for these activities. In order for costs to be eligible, you must have evidence that they took place and they must be related to your project. Information in regards to supporting documentation is detailed in Annex 3 of your grant agreement. On screen now is an example of costs which are considered ineligible. There are additional examples in Annex 2.19.4 and we would recommend checking this carefully. Article 2.27 contains information about checks and audits. Your project is subject to an audit from the point of signature of the grant agreement up until 5 years following the date of the final payment. Audits can be carried out by the UK National Agency, the European Commission and other Commission-mandated bodies. As a result, it is important that you keep all documents of expenditure, e.g. travel tickets, hotel invoices, throughout the course of the project. If your grant amount is more than €60,000, you will be required to keep all original documentation for 5 years. If the grant agreement is less than €60,000, documents will need to be kept for 3 years. Next, we're going to have a look at Annex 3, which details all information regarding supporting documents. The supporting documentation you will need to evidence the expenditure for travel is a certificate of attendance. You must also keep all travel tickets, invoices, and any documents associated with travel costs. Although you do not need to upload them as supporting documentation to your final report, you will need to keep them in case of audit. Proof of attendance will also be required, and you will need to specify the full name of the participant, their date of birth, the purpose of their activity, as well as the start and end dates. Organisational support is evidenced as a narrative in the final report and via a certificate of attendance. Again, any receipts or documents associated with this budget category must be kept. If you have been awarded funding for special needs support, you must keep the original invoices for each cost, and you will be required to upload them as annexes to your final report. If you have been awarded funding for exceptional costs, you must ensure that you check this section of the annex. There are 4 types of checks which could be carried out during your project as well as at final report stage. Checks can be carried out at the final report stage, and this applies to all beneficiaries, and your final report is assessed by external assessors. Secondly, there are desk checks which apply to a very small sample of beneficiary, and these take place at the UK National Agency. If you are selected for a desk check, you'll be asked to send in all original documents. We check them and then return them to you along with a report back to your organisation. On-the-spot checks could happen during the implementation of your project, and again could happen to a sample of beneficiary. These 2 checks take place at your organisation, where a member of the team will visit and review your project and documentation. Audit visits can also be performed by European bodies. Annex 3 provides further information in regards to these checks. Please ensure that you check your grant agreement and that you keep hold of the documents throughout the lifetime of your project. If you do not have evidence for costs, these could be removed from your final payment. So now we're going to talk about final reporting. Mobility Tool Plus is the online management and reporting tool for all Erasmus Plus projects, and it will be used to provide all information about your project, and you must ensure that you complete and update the budget information. You will need to log in to Mobility Tool in order to access your final report also, and you will need to create a personal EU login account if you have not already done so. When setting up your account, please ensure that you complete all mandatory fields marked with an asterisk. The email address you use to set up your account will need to be the same email address that you provide as your contact email. You will need to submit a final report within 60 days after the end date of your project. This will cover qualitative and financial information about your project. This is a contractual requirement and will trigger the final payment for the project. Before you are able to submit your report, you will need to upload the supporting documentation, such as invoices for special needs and exceptional costs, if these were part of your budget. And you will also need to upload the final report declaration of honour. We would recommend checking the supporting documentation section of your grant agreement in Annex 3. We are now going to look at impact. Here on screen you can see the Impact Plus exercise, which is taken from our website. It offers a visual aid to think about some of the groups that you could consider when thinking about the impact of your project. Impact is a fundamental change that happens as a result of an activity. It will generally occur in the long term, often after the activity has taken place. The Impact Plus tool offers a visual aid to think about some of the groups that you should consider when thinking about the impact of your project. These include the participants themselves, the project staff and what they have gained from this, partner organisations if they are included in the project, and the systematic changes. We would recommend thinking about measuring impact alongside successful indicators, and these indicators are measured and they allow progress towards the goal to be tracked. Now we're going to look at how you can share your success in-house, locally, globally and nationally, and how you can disseminate your project results. You can share best practice with other members of staff and share knowledge and your experiences. On the screen is a list of examples of how you can share your experiences. When you are spreading the word of your project and sharing your success, it's important to remember to do this at your organisation and at a local level. Make sure that you use the Erasmus Plus logo. You should be proud to have received funding and shout about your experiences. Write about it in newsletters, on your website and social media. You'll be able to include all of these in the dissemination section of your final report. And therefore, the more information you have, the better it will make your report. You will need to share your success at a local and global level with any case studies that you may want to share. The UK National Agency can help you showcase your project by featuring a case study in our newsletter and publication. We can also help you to promote them on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. And we can also help you with contacting press. If you do receive press coverage, please do let us know. Here are our contact details. If you do have any queries about your project, you can contact us via email and phone.